Good afternoon, friends, and welcome. My name is Allison Gampel, and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Programs at York University. This is the third talk in our GRADitude speaker series, which is a series that connects our newest grads to our wonderfully amazing alumni family. Grads, I said it in the first two sessions, and I'll say it again, we know this was not the way you planned to graduate, but we are so proud of you. We are especially proud of you, and we welcome you to the extended family that you've now joined of 325,000 alumni around the world. Although we are not all in the same location right now, it's important that we acknowledge that York is on a land that many Indigenous nations have had long-standing relationships with that precede the establishment of the university. York acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. As you know, recently, York University's president, Dr. Rhonda Lenton, issued an update to our community, reiterating the university's commitment to stand together against anti-Black racism. Please visit yorku.ca/rights and yorku.ca/mental health for resources to ensure that all of our community members, including new grads and alumni, feel safe and welcome. Some housekeeping before we begin. First, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you need any technical help, or if you have a question for the speakers, please type your questions there. We have a team behind the scenes who can help you if you're having any technical issues, and questions that you have for the panelists, I will ask on your behalf. If you still have questions after the talk, please feel free to connect with us. The alumni team can be reached at alumniandfriends.yorku.ca, and we always welcome your ideas, suggestions, and want to hear your stories. I also do want to let you know that the York Career Center is available to grads, and they can be reached at careers.yorku.ca. They have amazing material. You're about to meet our 5 wonderful alumni panelists who have volunteered to share with you today. But before we introduce them, we would like to know a little bit more about you, and they would like to know so that they can help you learn what you came to learn today. So we are going to launch a quick poll, and we ask if you could please tell us, what are your plans after graduation? I believe it's popped up on your screen, so I'll give everyone a moment to respond. Okay, I can see a lot of you are in the process of applying to jobs, and you probably came here because you'd love to have a job that one of our panelists has. A lot of you are also continuing your education. Congratulations, we are always big fans of education. Congrats to those of you who have secured a job and are still here to learn more and perhaps think about next steps. And for those of you who don't know, are doing something else or assessing your options, please know that it is really normal, and that our alumni community is here with you, supporting you as you try to figure out what it is that you want to do next. Okay, it's the moment you've been waiting for, and I'm honored to introduce to you our alumni panelists. Today we have Micah, Kimberly, Tanya, Daniel, and Nishal. And as I said before, when we were behind the scenes, I really thank you from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of our class of 2020 for being here today. Now, I could read bios for all of these wonderful alumni, but we know that you, our class of 2020 and other grads and students, would rather hear from them. So what I will ask each to do is give you about 2 minutes of information about themselves, a little bit of a teaser, and after each has introduced themselves, I'll ask them questions. So again, if you have questions for particular panelists or for the panel in general, please feel free to type them into the Q&A area, and I'll try to ask the questions on behalf. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our first panelist, our alum, Micah Anshan, who serves as Partnerships Manager at Right to Play. Over to you, Micah.
Thanks so much, Allison. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be part of this today. And so, thanks to York U and the Alumni Association for inviting us all together here today. Like Allison said, my name is Micah Anshan. I work for Right to Play as our Senior Development Manager, or Partnerships Manager for our Canadian programs. So I work really closely with government and as well as other funders. So I do a lot of government relations as well as fundraising to support about a $6 million national program that we run here in Canada. And always happy to sort of chat more about that. My Twitter handle's just in my name there. I graduated from York University with my master's in Science and Technology Studies in 2013. I think the thing that I really valued the most from my time at York was just sort of the interdisciplinary nature, both of my program, but also the opportunities to connect with students from other programs. So obviously, a little bit different sort of coming into the master's program there, but that's something that I really was able to carry with me into my first job. Sort of my first real job was in fundraising as a grant manager, and having that connection, knowing a lot about some sort of other sectors, as well as other sort of approaches to social development work from that time at York really helped me both secure that job and excel in it. So happy to chat more and answer more questions about that journey.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. Over to you, Kimberly. Kimberly Bedell is the co-founder, Caribbean Cancer Research Initiative, and she was a recipient of last year's Bryden Alumni Award for One to Watch. Kimberly, I'm just going to ask you to turn off unmute so we can hear you.
Sorry about that. I thought I was unmuted. So hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Allison. My name is Kimberly Bedell. I came to York in 2008 as an international student from Trinidad and Tobago, which is in the Caribbean, and that's where I presently live. So at York, I completed my Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Science. I completed that in 2012, and then I went on to do my Master's in Biomedical Science in the Netherlands, and then I'm now presently doing my PhD in molecular genetics here at the University of the West Indies in the Caribbean. So presently, I don't have a job in the traditional sense. I am what we call now a social entrepreneur. So I co-founded and presently run the not-for-profit organization called the Caribbean Cancer Research Initiative, and we focus on cancer research, training, and advocacy across the Caribbean region, and we also offer a lot of services for patients affected by cancer. So my trajectory has been a little different. I've never actually had a full-time job in the traditional sense. So the job that I have now is the one that I did not find, but that one that I created. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. And I'd like to next introduce Nishal Shah. He's a GIS technician with QSP Geographics. Over to you, Nishal.
Thank you, Allison. Good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, I'd like to say congratulations to all the new graduates for graduating. It's a big moment and it's a big achievement. So well done to all of you. So yes, as all of you know, my name is Nishal Shah. I was an international student from Nairobi, Kenya, like Kimberly. I studied the Bachelor of Environmental Studies program, and I graduated in 2018. So my first real job after graduating was project coordinator for an organization called the Toronto Region Conservation Authority. And the way I landed that job was through an internship, and that's another reason why I chose York as a university for me to pursue my education, because of the component of the experiential education component about it. And so I got my first job as an intern, and thereafter I got a 1-year contract with the organization, and I was very grateful for that. My main role was to be to organize one of the biggest conferences for green infrastructure in Ontario, and being an undergraduate student coming out of university, that was one of my biggest achievements. Thereafter, after I completed my year-long contract, I was on a job hunt, like many of you out there, and I landed a position with QSP Geographics Inc. as a GIS technician. My role with them currently is I do energy analysis using software. Mainly, it's called GIS. So in simple terms, using satellite imagery to carry out analysis. And I'm happy to chat with people interested in that further down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nishal. I'd next like to introduce Tanya Fuschino, who's Vice President Operations for Acclaim Ability Management.
Great, thank you, Allison, and thank you for having me here today. And congratulations, graduates. I hope you all found a unique way to celebrate this milestone in your lives and next steps before your career. Similar to my fellow panelists, I'm a graduate from York University. I graduated in 2010 with my specialized honors degree in psychology, and then I actually was completing a concurrent program that York offers through Seneca College, so the Seneca at York program called Rehabilitation Services. So in my time at York University, I participated in a lot of research studies and programs that York had offered, and through those opportunities, really able to network with not only my fellow students, but who now have eventually become my colleagues in the industry. And through this experience, I was doing a lot of part-time work, of course, during my undergrad. So I was working with municipalities, always involved in disability management, whether it was with young adults, children, or adults within the community. So following my experience and through the concurrent program at Seneca at York, through my internship, I was able to land the dream job that I didn't think I wanted. I had other plans, wanted to go to grad school. I applied for other studies. I didn't think that I would land in the industry I am in today, but 10 years later, after that experience that York and Seneca had, fortunately provided to me, I'm now the Vice President of Operations for a national disability management company. We are a private company that works specifically with employers across the country. We support just under 500,000 lives across Canada in return to work efforts whenever an individual has suffered either a physical or cognitive disability that's limiting their ability to return to work. And we really work with our partners in supporting their eventual reintegration back into the workplace. So happy to chat with you guys today about what your journey will look like in your workplaces.
Wonderful, thanks so much. And last but not least, we have Daniel Listy, who serves as Marketing Manager at PlayStation Canada, Sony. Over to you, Daniel.
Thanks, Allison. Everybody, thanks for joining, and congratulations on graduating this year. It finally happened, although under non-ideal circumstances. Bit about me, I actually started at York back in 2009, taking law and society at a high school. After 2 years, I realized it wasn't what I wanted to do, so I took a hiatus from university, went to college, completed something more of a passion point for mine, a diploma in sport management. From there, I was able to get internships and a full-time job with the Pan Am Games back in 2014 and 15, if anybody remembers that. Once that contract was over, I decided to complete my degree with more of a business focus, in which I completed the Business and Society program and graduated in 2017. And part of that was positioning myself to go into more of the business side of the sport and entertainment industry. So while I was at York, I joined the York Sport Business Association and was the VP of corporate relations there. And then coming out of York, I was fortunate to land a job at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, managing corporate sponsorships. And then from there, I left to go pursue an opportunity with an esports startup here in Toronto called Overactive Media. I was there for about 1.5 years until I was unfortunately laid off due to COVID. So I have experienced the hardships of these times. But fortunately, I was lucky enough to land at PlayStation just about a month ago. So here I am now. Made a journey through the sport and entertainment industry. I've had my ups and downs, just like you guys are about to endure. So I'm happy to give my advice and help wherever I can.
Thank you so much. And it's really wonderful to have the 5 of you here today and to hear the differences in your stories, the similarities in your stories, and have you sharing your passion and your contributions to our grads. So again, I want to echo everyone's sentiments of congratulations to our grads. We're going to take it over to questions that we've prepared, and we're not going to have every panelist answer each question. So I'm going to ask the first question first to Tanya and then to Nishal, and we'll do it that way. So the question for you, Tanya, is what York experience proved to be your most beneficial for you in successfully landing your first real job?
Yeah, thank you, Allison. So I think there's a few experiences, but if I really narrow it down to 2 in particular, there was one opportunity that I became a part of through my time and my undergraduate at York. It was a research study actually called the floor time based research study. And it basically worked with children who had autism, and there was a different approach. So the traditional approach to managing children with autism was IBI or ABA, so intensive behavioral intervention. And this approach was more of a play-based therapy. So at the time, I was very much in my undergraduate studies, very much looking forward to becoming a either full-time social worker or counselor or therapist. So I thought this was a great opportunity to get that hands-on experience. And through that experience, I was able to connect and network with a lot of families that I was supporting that had later become clients of mine as I was providing therapy to their children. But then I also met the founder of the play-based therapy, Jonathan Alderson, who had started and founded IMTI, so Intensive Multi-Treatment Intervention Therapy, which at the time wasn't funded by the government in terms of a recognized treatment program. So I was very proud to be a part of a research study that was breaking or trailblazing rather through alternative treatment to individuals with autism and how to support not only them, but as well as their families through that journey. So through that experience where I simply just wanted hands-on therapy experience, I was able to network not only again with families that I later supported and developed those relationships with, but with the founder of the treatment program. So that was one stepping stone for me to really understand how I can use the skills that I had learned in my studies, but also if I really wanted to apply them in that way. And then I would say maybe in my second or third year, I was in my abnormal psychology class, and there was a rush of students that came to the door and were asking to promote a program, and that's when they were promoting the rehabilitation services program, the concurrent joint program offering. And at the time, I had my heart set on either being an occupational therapist or, again, getting my master's in counseling. And I never thought that that opportunity would then drive me to the position I'm in today. So through that experience and taking part in an internship for a year, as I was handing in my exam, I remember my instructor said to me, "You should do your placement with Acclaimability." And I said, "Nah, I don't want to do insurance. That's not for me." And I'll never forget her words. She's like, "We're not insurance, we're a private sector. It's a different experience. I think you'd be a great fit." So I said, "Well, why not? I'm finishing up my thesis, and why don't I take this experience and see what happens?" And literally, probably a week after I wrote my last exam, fortunately, I was able to land my first job. But 10 years later, I haven't moved. So unfortunately, I think one of the drawbacks, maybe I'll get to that a little bit later, is being able to explore other options or take that risk. But I really think had I not been open to those opportunities that York had offered or to the programs that York had put on, I would have never realized this whole other industry that I had never even imagined I could be a part of or contribute to, and happy to be able to do so, a decade later. But certainly that's an experience that I take with me because I would have never had it if it wasn't for York. So thank you.
That's awesome. On behalf of York, you're very welcome. And thank you for coming back as an alum. Over to you, Nishal, to share with us what experience proved most beneficial to you in landing your first real job.
Thank you, Allison. So like Tanya, for me, there were a lot of experiences while at York that I took on. So I was fortunate enough to be a peer mentor and be able to be a president of one of the clubs, which all built some of my leadership skills that I later took on to my career. But then one main experience that I can point out was while I was at York, I was working for the Office of the President as a sustainable ambassador, and being in a career wanting to pursue a sustainability career. My job entailed spreading the awareness to the York community about what York is doing in terms of sustainability, and inviting and organizing two annual conferences, the Sustainability Fair and the Fair Trade Fair, where we would call upon vendors within the Toronto community who are practicing sustainability and come out to host and to show what sustainability initiatives they're doing in Toronto. So one of the conferences I organized, I came in contact with my then to be manager, who I had a conversation with, and it was a great conversation. And I was like, I wanted to do my internship there, but then how do I communicate and how do I take this further? Then after I spoke to my manager, Andrew Plunkett, and I asked him to connect me with Ian McVeigh, my manager at TRCA, who I later on emailed and messaged and said I wanted to do my internship with the organization, and is this is it possible? And he's like, yeah, let's have a meeting and see where this leads off to. And I met with him. We had a great conversation, and thereafter he offered me a internship position with the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. And thereafter, once I completed my internship, they saw the potential that I had and offered me a year-long contract with them, working with climate change initiatives and making a difference within municipalities. And so all in all, I think all the small pieces, the experiences that I got from York, being involved in different clubs and different groups, and being out there and interacting with the community, gave me that stepping stone to then pursue my career and creating that path for me to pursue my career. Yep.
Absolutely, thank you. So we've talked a little bit about what's been beneficial during York. I'm going to ask the next question to Micah and then Daniel. What experience beyond York proved to be the most beneficial for you in successfully landing your first real job? Over to you, Micah.
For sure. Thanks, Alison. So yeah, when I was sort of reflecting on that question, I think one thing that I thought about is actually conferences and conference presentations and the different things that come along with that. So obviously my time at York, I was there for about a year. I was in my master's program, and at that time my goal was to really sort of enter academia, determine where I was going to do my PhD, whether it was going to be, York or elsewhere. And sort of maybe halfway through the year, I kind of made a decision that, maybe I needed some time away from the academy. I was really interested in sort of nonprofit work and how to make an impact at the community level. Don't get me wrong, still believe sort of in university, I believe in doing your master's, your PhD. There is a lot of important work that needs to be done and can be done there. It just wasn't for me at the time. So with that in mind, when I started sort of going to conferences and presenting some of my own research, which at the time was around sort of the drug addiction crisis that we were seeing out west, that sort of from then sort of moved across the whole country, and safe injection facilities and the research around that, started to meet a bunch of interesting people who are doing sort of community-based work. But what I think I realized sort of years later, what I sort of got the most out of the conference presentations was not presenting my own research and getting feedback on it and kind of that interesting exchange of ideas, but with more of those sort of life skills or 21st century, or some people call them soft skills, or whatever you really want, just really in terms of presenting, public speaking, being able to answer difficult questions sort of on the spot. Like obviously I would try to sort of anticipate questions that would come up about my research, but really when you're in that moment and you have a professor from another school who you've never met in your entire life asking you something that's sort of maybe cutting to the core of one of the not the strongest part of your argument, say, and you've got to sort of stand there and look confident and be able to respond in time. Practicing that again and again really made my life a lot easier when it sort of came to interviewing, I found, because my heart rate didn't go up. I felt I knew the answers. I'd been in here before. For better or for worse, I've been like, I've had some really embarrassing experiences while doing like conference presentations. Like, it's not going to be that bad again, Micah. Like, don't worry about it. Just get through this. And so that really helped. That and the networking. I think, we talk a lot about the importance of networking, of expanding your networks. Obviously, it's a little bit different right now, and it's tough to do that face to face. But I think it's something you also need to practice to get good at it. I haven't really met anyone, maybe a few people who are just like the most charismatic person in the room, all eyes are on them all time, whatever. And they don't have sort of any issue, going up and introducing yourself and making small talk and sort of determining, it might not be this person that has the connections you need, but they might know someone 2 degrees away that is just that right individual for you to make that connection with. So, conferences are a great time to practice that as well. Obviously a little bit more difficult in sort of this digital age that we're in, but people are available and have a lot of free time to have those conversations. So I just say, be willing to reach out through social media, through LinkedIn, whatever. I'm certainly been, fielding a lot more of those conversations, and people are really willing to do it.
Thank you. That's some really good advice. Daniel, do you have anything that you'd like to add about what helped you?
Yeah, Micah kind of stole my thunder there, but for me, anything outside of York that I did, I made sure it was either would improve my networking and build my connections, or my experience. One thing that I used to do quite often, and one thing that directly got me my first internship, was volunteering. And through volunteering, I realized, I was building my experience that I could add to my resume, whether it be with big events and kind of fluffed up titles that where you actually did do a lot of work versus just having my retail experience on my resume. But at the same time, leaving an impression on the people I've worked with so that those contacts would call me for future references and so on. And that's how I got my first internship. And beyond that, it was really learning outside of York. So as I was at York, I said, okay, I want to get into the sport and entertainment industry and marketing, sponsorship, etc. That's not necessary. There's no real courses to take for that at York. So I said, what else can I do beyond my York curriculum where I can learn these things? So it was attending panels, attending events, attending conferences, not as a speaker per se, as Micah may have, but as somebody in the audience, and utilizing those experiences to connect with people. And I would do my research on LinkedIn, who was going to be there, who is the leader of this organization, that organization. Then when I saw them, I would go and introduce myself and say, hey, here's what I've done, here's where I've worked, et cetera, and so on and so forth. I continued to build my network where then when I landed jobs, they saw me in the line of work directly. Like, I remember that kid when he was just at a conference as a student, right? So for me, it was doing anything beyond York. I always looked at my peers in the classroom. I said, okay, if you're seeing in a tutorial of like 30 people, I would say, what am I doing more than these 30 people in this room to get a job after York? Everyone's gonna come out with a degree with the same line item on their resume. Everyone's gonna come out with some sort of experience, whether it's retail, restaurant, whatever it is, service industry jobs. But what was I doing when I graduated that would put my resume ahead of the people I'm sitting around in my classrooms? And that was my strategy going forward. It was always, what can I do to build my network and build my experience? And that's kind of how I was able to continue rolling throughout my career. And I don't know if people have been able to kind of get the trend here, but it sounds like everyone either got their first job or the job that they're in now through connections, not just applying online to a blind position. And that's true for myself as well. And those connections you make really do pay off in the long run if you're good at your work and you live up to your expectations.
Thanks for that. And I definitely want to echo that, now is a very good time to be building those connections. And just for those of you who are in the audience watching this right now, you're doing the right thing. And by being here, you're showing that you have what it takes to get what you want. So kudos to you all. Going to turn it over next to Kimberly and Tanya to answer our third question. And the question is there anything you wish you had known when you were getting started in your career, or that you wish you had done differently? Over to you, Kimberly.
So my answer here may be a bit philosophical or probably not traditional, but it's something that I really wanted the students to really hear. So I thought about this long and hard, and I can truly say that there's nothing I wish I had known or done differently when I started this journey. And the reason for this is that I believe that we all make the best decision with the information that we have at that moment, specific moment in time. It's important for you students to know that that is enough. And so all of these decisions, I believe, are just part of your journey, part of the process that is sort of molding you into being the best person that you could be now, and molding you into the person that you're going to be for the next phase or point in your life. And sometimes the lessons that we learned are better learned in hindsight. And I saw that so many times throughout my career, throughout my, through my degrees and everything. The best lessons I've learned have been in hindsight. So if someone had told me while I was at York that I should do X, Y, and Z, which I mean, people did, but I didn't really take them on, then I would not have gone on the trajectory that I've gone on now, which has been, I've gone and I'm totally passionate about this. I have no regrets. And it was because I deliberately did not listen to the traditional advice that everybody was saying, especially when you finish with a degree in science, that you need to do X, Y, and Z, you need to stay in Canada, you need to do this, that, and the other. So I just want you students to give yourself the space to know and trust that you're making the right decisions now. And this is just part of your journey. Enjoy the journey.
That's some wonderful advice. I almost feel bad asking Tanya to answer the same question after, but I will anyway. So over to you, Tanya. But any lessons learned in hindsight?
Yes, no, definitely. And Kimberly, I think you put that so well, so eloquently, and it really is to be present in the moment. I think to your point, if you would, or rather, if you have goal, you have a path. It's great to have a plan. It's great to have a plan B, a plan C, and kind of know where you want to fall back on. I think it's important to have that plan. But I think to remove the pressures that you may be putting on yourself as new graduates on what is my career going to be. Your first job may not be your forever job, and that's okay. So Kimberly, to your point, enjoy the moment, enjoy those experiences, take what you can from the opportunities in front of you. Your job that you, or the career that you may get into, you may get into the same industry, but your role may change, or you may get into completely different industry than you thought you would, and that's okay too. You may be working somewhere that's completely unrelated to what you studied, and that's okay too, because there's going to be transferable skills that you're going to pick up, whether it's time management skills, public speaking, communication skills, problem or conflict resolution. You'll find that in any job, whether you are working in retail, customer service, phone center, anything that you do, you will bring those experiences, those lessons learned, and those skills with you to your eventual forever job and to your career. So absolutely be present, know what it is you want to do, have a plan, but don't be so hard on yourself if that plan doesn't, if you don't execute that plan according to your timeline, your parents' timeline, and do not compare yourself to your peers either. I think we get, especially in this day and age, in a very digital world, in a very social media influence world, it's very easy to compare yourself, but you don't know where you'll end up. You may have plans, you may travel abroad. Well, maybe not right now with COVID, but you may have different plans than your peers or than your fellow colleagues. Do not compare yourself, because where you're meant to be, you will eventually get there as long as you have the determination, you put in the hard work, and pick yourself up from your failures. There's going to be a few closed doors and locked doors, and you can either choose to knock them down or build the skills so that you can eventually open them. So I would agree with you wholeheartedly. It's not about what do you regret or what you would have done differently, because in hindsight, you'll always think, well, I could have said this and I could have done that, or I could have taken an extra course. It's never too late to do any of those things. Just take those lessons, and so that you can continue to develop and grow to your next step.
That's really great advice. And if you do choose to do any of those courses at York, check us out, because we have some alumni discounts for some coursework that folks might want to do. Okay, I'm going to take it. One more question. I'm going to direct this question to Micah, followed by Nishal, and then Kimberly. And it's just a question that many people are sort of thinking of is, what common attributes have you noticed about amongst sort of new or younger people that get hired into your organizations? So over to you, Micah.
For sure, thanks. It's a really good question. I think, yeah, a few things. One is definitely sort of we're in the sort of the nonprofit charitable sector, so a passion for the cause, or some sort of connection to sort of the why of being there is certainly important for us, and I think important for a lot of different employers. Following up on sort of what Kimberly and Tanya were saying about following your passion, or maybe not taking like the most direct route to your first job or to your career. Being passionate about like what you're doing doesn't necessarily mean being passionate about like every little aspect of your job. Like my first role, had a lot of, I did charitable donation receipts for like a couple of hours every day, and like that wasn't the most exciting thing for me. But I knew what the importance was for the wider organization, and so I was sort of willing to take that on. And as I progressed in my career, like I'm obviously I don't have to do as much of those sort of tasks anymore. So there's definitely sort of that passion, but also sort of an openness and willingness to learn, coupled with a bit of humility that I'm seeing a little bit more and more. So folks who come in and say, yeah, I know how to do absolutely everything. I'm going to teach everyone. Everything is going to be great. Like, I think that passion, that ambition is really strong, but tempered with a little bit of like, here's what I'm really good at, and here's what I'm hoping to learn in this role. Here's how I'm going to grow. Here's maybe what that learning curve is going to look for me. When I hear that, for example, like in an interview, then I'm like, oh, this person's actually, quite self-reflective. They know what they don't know and where they need to grow. And I'm sort of more open and willing to sort of trust someone that has that bit of self-reflection.
Yeah, those are great points. Nishal, is there anything you want to add to what you noticed about new hires?
Yeah, thank you. As Daniel also said, that connections is important, but at the same time, don't be yourself, be unique. Don't try to be something that you're not. And like Tanya and the other panelists say, that it may not be your dream job, but the skills that you get, or the entry-level positions that you get, will give you those skills to further to get those transferable skills to then transfer into a dream job that you may want later on. Also at this time, like it is it is easier to connect with people through LinkedIn and stuff, because you don't have, for those who are shy to talk to people in person, you can reach out to people, to mentors directly on LinkedIn and connect with them and build those connections. For folks who are not pursuing to look for a job right now and doing higher education, you can still pursue those connections, because you never know, later on down the road those connections may help you to get the job as well.
Thank you for that, Nishal. And Kimberly, and you come from a different perspective with grad school and starting your own venture. So what do you think about people that are entering their first position?
So with my NGO, I am in a position where, together with the people we have at HR, do the hiring and the firing. And so as the founder, my word is sort of the last word when it comes to the hiring and the firing of people. And what I have recognized is that people are very enamored by the idea of what we're doing. Okay, they love the projects, they're fired up about the prospects of what can be done, they're very passionate about future possibilities. But so it's easy in the beginning to be fired up and passionate because you haven't started to do anything much as yet. But what we found is that as time goes on and the rubber hits the road and it's actually time to get things done, there's often a disconnect that happens. And that determines usually if the people who stay with us and the people who move on to another adventure. So yes, you may have an initial love for what you're doing, but what you also have to recognize is that results only come with hard work, sacrifice, and dedication. So when it's month 6 and your project didn't go as planned, and there's some monotonous company protocol that you have to do and you don't want to do, or you're doing donation receipts like Micah pointed out, how do you stay motivated? And so that is the gap that we've been seeing. We've seen passion start and then sort of dwindle because people love the idea, but not necessarily love all of the effort, the daily grunt and grind that goes into these things. So I think it's important for you all to remind yourself that anything worth doing takes time. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and it has lots of high and low moments. So accept and get comfortable with the process of the job that's involved in the job that you're doing, regardless of what the outcomes are, and be patient. So it's good to be fired up and passionate, which is what we see a lot of times in the beginning, but also pair that with long-term discipline and a long-term perseverance, and obviously to stay positive.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to ask a final question to all of our panelists and have each of you take a moment or two to answer. And as this is triggering thoughts to our audience, please feel free to write your questions into the Q&A area. We'll see them as they come in. And after we finish this part, we will turn it over to your questions. So we are going to start with Daniel. And what I'd like you to chat about with our group today is, you know, as we know, this class of 2020 has done an amazing job getting to this point, but they're entering the job market at a challenging time. So what's, you know, a final thought that you'd like to leave them with in terms of advice you'd give? Daniel, you can start.
Sorry about that, I was on mute. For myself, I'll pull on from my own experience because quite frankly, I was in a similar position to them about 2 months ago. I was laid off from my last job on March 31st. And I was unemployed up until the middle of May. And I sat down, I said to myself, you can't be upset at this. This is both a terrible time to be laid off because the job market is terrible since the last recession, but also a good time to be laid off because all the benefits that the government is providing, but also it doesn't look bad that you're unemployed right now because it's completely understandable given the situation. So you don't have to be so hard on yourself that you don't have a job right now. And for myself, I was being realistic. I said, you know what, I don't think I'm going to get hired again until probably August, September. So, but what I did was I didn't just take the time off and kind of sulk. I still woke up and was sitting on my computer every morning at 9 a.m. And I was scheduling meetings and calls and connecting with people, learning about what other companies are doing, how are people navigating these difficult times, and just trying to understand what was still going on in my industry despite being separated because I was unemployed. At the same time, I was still speaking to students. I had a number of students reach out to me and asking for advice as well. I was letting them know what I knew and handing them off to other people who may be able to help guide their journey a bit further. So for me right now, I would say, don't be hard on yourself. These are some of the lowest lows you'll experience. Better days are coming ahead. So don't be afraid of what's going on. Just keep trucking through. That's like, we've all been there. Make connections. I know we've said that a lot, but utilize LinkedIn. It's a powerful tool when you use it right. And a lot of people are open to conversation right now. A lot of people who you may be reaching out to for advice were graduating back in 2008 to 2010 when that was the last recession. So they understand what you're going through right now, and they're more empathetic towards what you're going through right now. And lastly is, don't be afraid to take risks. It's easier to take risks and cover up mistakes in your early 20s versus your late 30s and beyond, when family situations might change and you might have more responsibility. You might look and say, hey, maybe it's better for me to do a post-grad at a college for a year, because the job market might not change for the next year to get into those entry-level positions. So just make sure you're using your time wisely, and you don't want to be sitting back in the same spot you're in a year from now and say, I wish I had done that, or I wish I'd taken that option. Don't be afraid to act now, because like I said, it's easier to cover up mistakes when you're graduating at like 23 versus when you're 40, right?
Hey, don't knock us 40-somethings.
Never.
That's okay. That's okay. I came to York 17 years ago, and you were all so wonderful that I just don't seem to leave. That was really, really wonderful advice, and thank you to that. So, Tanya, what advice do you have for the class of 2020?
Yeah, I think Daniel, you covered quite a few points, and really valid points. And I think you're going to experience a lot of challenges in your career and for the rest of your life until retirement. And the fact that you are starting your career on such a challenging note, on such a challenging mountain to climb, I think that this generation of graduates will undoubtedly be a force to be reckoned with in the workforce when things do become a little bit more stable again, because you are you're persevering, your coping mechanisms, I'm sure, are put to the test right now. And you're going to need to utilize all of these experiences that you're going through right now, eventually in your career at some point. So the fact that you're starting, at more of a challenging time than maybe otherwise you would have if this pandemic hadn't came about at this point in time, I think will serve you well eventually in your career. And I think we can all shout it from the rooftops. Networking is going to be key here. Volunteering your time, use this time to reflect. So are there elements of your, what you studied or other areas that you're curious about? Now's the time to explore that as best as you can, because you have not only the time, but you have the space to do that as well. So I would say use this time wisely to really reflect on where you want to go, and persevere. Don't give up.
Yeah, that's some really great advice. Over to you, Kimberly.
Yes, so echoing exactly what Tanya says, my advice to you now would be, while you're applying for jobs, etc., to make time to take a profound pause in your life where you try to figure out what your passion is and you make a plan to go into that direction. Because what I've seen is that if you don't take the time now to figure out what really fires you up and what you really want to do, the universe will force you to do that later in life, and it will come after many soul-crushing years of doing something that wasn't meant for you. So create a pause and really think about where your passion lies and go in that direction.
Absolutely. And the last word before we take questions from our audience goes to Micah, please.
Sure thing. So yeah, I think just a few pieces of advice, echo sort of what everyone's said today. I think, volunteering your time if you're able to this summer. I know that there are sort of supports for, I believe, recent grads as well, or for folks who are maybe returning to school or considering returning to school. I do agree now it is, and that is a factor that you should consider is, what those opportunities are. This might be something to consider now. The two things that I'd say is, one motto that I try to have, and when I talk to other grant writers and folks in our sector, is sort of turn your weakness into strength. If there's an area that you don't think you're going to be super strong on in a job interview, now's not a bad time to go out and have some other education around that specifically, so you can speak to it in a job interview. Or even if you're not able to do that, I find compelling answers in an interview setting, like, I don't know this today, but I'm really passionate about it, and here's my plan to learn about it. Or I hope to sort of invest in professional development, like once I have that role. And as as Daniel was saying, like now's a good time to also say, look, yeah, I didn't, have all the job experience in the world in 2020, 2021, but I used that time to volunteer, to build these networks, to build these types of skills that will play very well sort of next year, and then or hopefully sooner. And then, on top of that, I'd say just sort of saying yes. The biggest regrets that I have in my life have not been sort of saying yes to something. You can, whether it's a volunteer experience or a job that, maybe wasn't the perfect fit, but, was on the table at the time. The times I have regretted things are when I've sort of said no to something or sort of let an opportunity pass me by without even sort of taking a chance on it and just seeing what it was all about. So that's what I would say.
Those are some really, really good reflections and thoughts. Thank you for that. So we're going to take some questions that are coming in from our audience. And the first question that I'm going to ask, and I apologize if I'm not saying your names properly, but the first question comes from Selena, and I'm going to direct this question to Daniel because he's been more recently in job hunting mode. And the question is, how did you keep your positivity going when job hunting?
Yeah. Positivity is not something that goes with me. I'm a very negative, pessimistic person, to be quite honest with you. But when I was laid off, I was kind of like I said, I'm like, it's both a good time and a bad time to be laid off. I felt like I'd been in this position before where I've been in the perpetual job hunt. I feel like my entire career kind of coming out of internships, going back to school and then trying to find another job and so on and so forth. So for me, everyone is doom and gloom right now these days. You have to look at the silver lining, and kind of like how Micah mentioned, it's saying yes to those opportunities that come by your desk. You're not gonna find your dream job right now, and rarely anybody ever does. So you got to be realistic with yourself and say, okay, here's my experience, here's what I can bring to a company, and here's the job market, and it's gonna look slim. So you got to think, okay, what am I doing to prepare myself when the time is right for me to apply? And that's how I approach things, right? I hate this saying, but it's kind of like how I always used to see it on my grade 6 wall above my chalkboard. It was like, shoot for the moon, and if you miss, you'll land among the stars, that cheesy saying. But that's kind of always what I've been doing. I've always had that pie in the sky goal of where I wanted to be. And I figured if I didn't achieve that goal, I would do enough to get close to it that I would probably land pretty close to where I wanted to be, or pretty well off. So yeah, again, I'm sorry because I'm not much of a positive person, so I can't give some inspirational quotes, but it's looking at those silver linings, being realistic with the situation and saying, okay, here's what it is. You can feel bad for yourself, and if you do, you're not going to get anything out of it, or you can roll up your socks and say, hey, here's what I got to do. Here's how I'm projecting the industry to go over the next couple of years. And here's what I should do to be at that position so that when the time is right, I'm the top candidate for a company that I want to work for.
Yeah, I think that's really, really great advice. Nishal, over to you to add on.
Yeah, I just want to say that there's only so many hours you can dedicate to job hunting as well. So when you're not using those hours to job hunt, reflect on yourself and see what skills that you're missing to study and to learn on those skills, and see what other resources there are out there. Again, during that free time, try to network with people and just take that time to reflect on it. It's not a must that you may land the job straight away, but those skills that you attain during that time will help you going forward.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. I'm going to turn it over to Tanya with the next question, and it comes from Chantel, who submitted a few questions. So thank you, Chantel, and hi. And Chantel would like some more details about the steps to take in job search, and particularly in an interview, do they ask you about your courses?
That's a good question, Chantel. And I think I know, as I was skimming through the questions and you asked if anyone had come from Faculty of Health. So when I was at York, we had transitioned. So the psych degree had transitioned from Faculty of Arts to Faculty of Health while I was studying. So I am with you on that. I would say in the interview process, especially in this phase, we do see, I will say in terms of some of the resumes that we see, we do see some mention of courses specifically related to, I'll say, case management. So again, whether it's through psychology or kinesiology or that related background or a health science related background. I would say practicing your skills for interviewing. So if you can have, a friend, a family member, someone to maybe role play with you for some interview questions. Some courses that you may have taken that are relevant to the position would be beneficial to bring up or to speak about, especially if you're at a point right now where you don't necessarily have the hands-on experience in whatever field you're looking to get into. So mention of the courses and of that, theoretical knowledge about the aspects that you may be applying to the role would be beneficial to talk about in the interview process. But certainly I think it'd be beneficial and during this time now to really see if you can develop kind of that role play with someone who maybe won't giggle with you through that process or ask you those pointed questions, so you can really prepare yourself on what that experience would be like when you do get to the stage of interviewing.
Absolutely, and I think that York's Career Center also does some interviewing training and some mock interviewing, so that's a great resource to tap into. Even in these days, they can do it remotely. I want to take on Monica's question, and I'll ask Kimberly that question. And Monica asks, "What's the hardest part of the journey in eventually being established in your career, and how do you navigate challenges?"
That's a great question. That's a loaded question too. How do I navigate challenges? So, what I have realized is that challenges do not end. They never end. They keep coming, and they keep coming. But what I've learned is that every challenge is an opportunity for a lesson that you need to learn. And until you learn that specific lesson, it will always be a challenge. That specific thing will keep coming up and coming up and coming up until you learn that lesson. So for example, I learned that I'm very impatient. Okay, I know now that in order to run an organization, I need high levels of patience, but I still, to this day, I'm still learning that lesson. And I know that once I've learned it, the universe will leave me alone, right? And I would be able to settle in more carefully, but then another challenge would come and there would be another lesson for me to learn. So I think you need to just get comfortable being uncomfortable. Get comfortable being challenged. Once you find that groove and get comfortable there, you're basically unstoppable, because challenges are ubiquitous. Everybody experiences them to some degree or another. Nobody's ever exempt from them. And the higher you go, the more challenges come. The bigger they are, the more stressful it becomes, etc. And it's just an opportunity for you to learn that lesson that you need to learn at that point in your life. So just accept it.
Absolutely. Okay, so we are about to wrap things up, although I feel like we could probably talk for hours. Are there any panelists that have a last word that they're dying to get out, or is there a last question that you wish we'd asked you? Okay, so I will leave you with, what I've been thinking about as we've had this conversation. What I've really been left with is York's motto. And I don't know who knows York's motto. It's Tentanda Via. And Tentanda Via means the way must be tried. And you on this panel have all inspired me personally in sharing your stories about how you've tried different things, and how you are, pursuing avenues, not giving up, and how you're willing to share. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and for sharing your stories with our class. As a token of our appreciation, we will be making a donation on your behalf to the COVID Emergency Student Fund. There are a lot of students in need, and hopefully that reflects our appreciation for your participation here today. To our wonderful class of 2020, congratulations to you all. Hopefully you've picked up some nuggets here. Should you want any additional information, please visit the Career Center, contact our alumni office if we can be of help to you. Also, this was recorded, so if you want to go back and hear some of these tidbits again, or just get a little bit of inspiration or that validation that it's okay and it's okay to have a down day, then this will be posted on YouTube in the next few days. Please follow us on social channels and stay up to date with what's going on with alumni. And with that, I wish you all a wonderful day. Congratulations to our class of 2020, and have a wonderful, safe evening. Thanks.